am to people. And I call it the power of who, which is that if you ask me who I am, I might tell you that I'm the greatest father in the history of the world. And you say, well, who does your son think you are? Because you are his
Yeah.
father. And I'd say, I believe my son thinks I'm the greatest father in the history of the world. And then you might interview my son, and he might say, no, he's okay. So who am I? Am I?
I'm so excited to have Nate on. Nate, thank you so much for being on the show. Whenever I saw your profile, I was really excited because I used to be an educator for almost 30 years and
Okay.
I felt like I was an advocate for the kids. And reading your profile, you really are. I mean, it's almost like your life's ambition. So, how did you become, and this, I love this too, humanity propulsion engineer? What is
Okay.
that exactly?
Yeah, it's just like it sounds. So you said you're an educator, so you would probably say to your students, all right, let's look at every word on its own. Let's start with humanity. Well, what is humanity? That's pretty clear. That's people and our ability to be compassionate for other people on the planet. What is propulsion? Propulsion is to go forward or perhaps to go up. And how do we go forward as a species? How do we improve, as in going up? And then what is engineering? Well, engineers are people who come up with tools and techniques and strategies to help humans move forward positively. And that's my objective.
Wow, I love it because it's so technical. You know that the people that go, I don't really understand, that is very specific, and I absolutely love that. So, when did you decide in your life, that you wanted to become this? What really motivated you? What was your inspiration behind, your objective?
I think there are two perhaps central times in my life where that's most notable. Number one is my parents and who they decided to name me to be. I think it's really significant the names that we get. And my name is Nathaniel, which is in Hebrew, which means gift of God. And my mother's a person of faith. So too is my grandmother's. All of my grandmothers certainly have that attribution. My father, a different kind of faith, a faith that believed that people should be concerned more with their deeds than their words, and was not convinced that, for example, my mother's commitment to her faith understood that significance as much. And he wanted to name me after somebody he believed who put his words into action. And that person was Nat Turner. So my father wanted to name me after Nat Turner, the revolutionary, and my
Yeah.
mother wanted to name me Nathaniel after the gift of God, and Nat's real name was Nathaniel, and so, hence I was given the name Nathaniel. And given that name, then you have these two sets of people that are pulling on you to be the thing that they named you. Father wants me to be revolutionary, wants me to care about other people, to think about something more than myself, to
Mhm.
fight for other people's freedom, accept. And my mom wants me to be the best possible human that I can be. So that's where that begins. And then when my
Yeah.
son was 16 and he decided that he wanted to go off on his journey, which was to chase his dream of playing professional soccer, he told me that he expected me to do more, that it wasn't enough that I had helped him, but he expected me to not only help other people, but to begin to dream about what I wanted to accomplish in my own life once again, because I'd forgotten about all of that,
Yeah.
and to do more. And so he's an engineer. And when I came up with the ideal of calling myself a humanity propulsion engineer, first I had to get his approval that it was okay for me to call myself an engineer.
I absolutely love that. And don't you feel like we learn so much from our kids?
Yes. I do think it's interesting because I heard your previous guest talk about his faith walk, so to speak, that he was an
Mhm.
ambassador. My grandmother would always say to me, talk to me about the tree and the fruit. I don't think I fully embraced it and understand it. I understand it now, perhaps more than I ever understood it, maybe sometimes more than I want to understand it.
Right.
But but I understand, right, that I am a tree of a fruit. But the unique thing about thinking about trees and fruit is that one day your fruit becomes a tree, and hopefully that tree that surpasses you, and you find shade and a respite under the tree. And so now my fruit is a tree. that I find shade and
Mm.
respite, who gives me encouragement, et cetera, and helps me to move forward. So if you
Oh my
don't do
gosh.
the right job with your inputs, then you're going to have some issues later on with the output.
Absolutely. I love that. All right, before we move on, I want to ask you a question. So
Sure.
give me 5 words. Okay, just 5 words. And you can have,
Okay.
more than that if you need to. It's not like you can't do that. 5 words of what you feel makes a good parent.
5 words. What makes it? Make sure this is an excellent question. No one's ever asked me this, Michelle. You've got me stumped.
It's okay. It's
Um,
good.
the first thing is 5 words. So I'm gonna use time, balance, model, legacy, uh, who.
Ooh, let me ask you that. What do you mean by who?
So I think I figured if I ask you that one, we you might not remember all the other ones. So that's why I had that. So in my mind, who is the most important word in all human language? It is the most devalued word, but it's the most important word. For example, if Jesus was amongst us today, people would say, who, right? And
Mhm.
he'd give a response. I think who is the determinant of who will be when our time on this planet is up. I think who determines who we help serve and make sure others know that their lives matter. When my time on this planet is up, someone else, based upon who they believe me to be by my
Mhm.
interactions with them, will decide what is in my obituary. And they'll decide for all eternity who I was in writing. Who I am, someone will come to a viewing or some memorial of some site type, hopefully, and they
Mhm.
will eulogize me. And who I was to them will be who I am in spoken word for all eternity. And when my final days are and my family decides to put me wherever they put me, in an urn, in a box, in a garbage can, wherever, when the last final words are written, who I was will appear on that document. And so who I am to people, and I call it the power of who, which is that if you ask me who I am, I might tell you that I'm the greatest father in the history of the world. And you say, well, who does your son think you are? Because you are his
Yeah.
father. And I'd say, I believe my son thinks I'm the greatest father in the history of the world. And then you might interview my son and he might say, no, he's okay. So who am I? Am I the greatest father in the history of the world that I think I am? Am I the greatest father in the history of the world that I think my son believes I am? No, I am exactly who the person I'm in a relationship with says that I am. And my son says I'm just mediocre. And that's who I will be. And that's what he'll probably write about me and say about me and put on my etch on my tomb or my urn when I'm gone.
Oh my goodness. And you know what, Nate, I am learning so much about you because I love how you express yourself in the words, and you are a wonderful writer. And I did read Raising Superman. And the reason why I chose that book is because it is, your son is on your shoulders in
Mhm,
a Superman cape, and I'm all about
mhm.
superheroes.
All right.
And I absolutely loved it. So tell us the inspiration and maybe a little bit summary of the book of why
Sure.
you decided to write it.
Okay, so the genesis of it is this. I wanted to be a better father than my father. I am like a lot of people. I'm a broken. In fact, my wife and I, when we learned we were going to be parents, called ourselves the Misfits. From it's a Santa Claus coming to town, and the children are toys from the island of the Misfit
Oh,
toys. Like
mm,
my wife had 7 adverse childhood experiences or ACEs. I have 8 of those, and collectively we have 9 of the 10 that the CD says are things that may prevent you from having a productive life, living long, etc.
mm.
So when I learned I was going to be a father, I started taking notes about what I wanted to happen for my child's life. And one day, the 2-year-old son of mine walks to the mailbox with me and reminds me about the notes that I'm taking. And he does so by asking me for mail. So I'm going to get mail, and he says, Daddy, where's my mail? And I'm trying to convince him that there's nothing good in the mailbox. But Daddy, where's my mail? I want mail. So long story short, I start writing him letters. And the letters are what you see in Raising Superman. I just would write him all the time. I would write him to tell him how much I love him. I might write him and tell him I'm disappointed. I might write him because I saw something at the ocean that reminded me of something that he needs to remember to do. I just would write him all the time. And so when he's the 16-year-old and has done more than I could have ever imagined, but I shouldn't be surprised because I wrote notes about what I wanted him to accomplish. He says, I don't want to go back to high school for my senior year. I've had enough of that. I've done what you all asked me to do. My grades are phenomenal. I've earned 33 college credits. I test in the 1%. I speak four languages. I've started my own foundation, yada, yada, yada. But I want to go do what you've always talked about, Dad. You talked about dreaming. I want to go chase my dream. And I want to move out of the country to chase my dream of playing professional soccer. So he does. He moves to Brazil. And when I take him to Brazil to leave him at the academy, I take some of the letters that I'd written him because he's going to be 7,000 miles away. I don't know how we can't afford to talk to him every day.
Mhm.
So I say, hey, here's the binder with some of the letters, and I leave him. And I go to Rio for a few days by myself. And I would say every man should go to Rio by himself every once in his lifetime. But but while I'm there, my wife calls me. She says, you're gonna have to go back to the academy. He's not doing well, and I think he's gonna need to come home. And I go back to the academy, and when I get there, I'm expecting him to have this sullen look on his face and maybe his back's back and he's got a big smile on his face. And I said, hey, what's going on? He said, Dad, I just got a question. I said, what's up? He said, I reread some of the letters. You put them in the binder. Did you put them in any particular order? And I said, no, why? He says, I read the first three. I remember my purpose. I'm going to be fine and I'm
Mhm.
staying. But Dad, even better, whenever I come back, we're going to publish these letters. And I said, really? He said, yes, because Dad, when you tell me I can do something, not only do I believe I can do it, I know it's going to happen. And I think other families need to have access to these letters. So that's a long answer to your
Oh,
short
no.
question. He's the reason that the
Mhm.
letters exist. They were his letters. They weren't mine to publish. He said we should publish them, and he did all the work to get the
Wow.
book to get
Oh
the
my
book published.
gosh. Oh, kids, I love them. I got to tell you which one's my favorite chapter.
Right.
It was the
Sea
green
turtle.
sea turtle. It resonated with me, and I think because there's so many symbols in it, symbolism, and just talking about the sea turtle,
Hmm.
and it talks, about the high tide, the low tide, and the main thing was be bold and have faith, and also life's journey is never flat. It's always going up and down. Now that was what I got it from as a reader point of view.
Hmm.
What was the theme of that? Do you remember? I know it's been so long since you wrote it.
Yeah, no, my thing was we'd gone to Brazil, and what I wanted when I saw the turtles, what I wanted to remind him, one, that I thought what he was doing was phenomenal,
Right.
that life requires you can't live in a shell. You have to
Yes.
stick your head out, right? And take some chances. And so I was like, you're doing that, but I don't want you to ever stop. I don't expect this time to be easy because one of the things he was concerned about going to Brazil, which is perhaps the top country for producing professional soccer players, that it was going to be so challenging. And I'm like, yeah, but that's fine. But that's life. Life is about ebbs and flows.
Yes.
If all life were peaks and there were no valleys, then the land would be flat. And if all you were ever in valleys and there were no peaks, then the land would be flat and you would know the difference. So that's part of the journey. There's yin to yang all the time. So I think that's pretty much what I wanted him to do is just to live his life understanding that whatever he wanted to accomplish is possible, but he's gonna have to stick his head out and take some chances and not be focused on the outcome all the time, but
Mhm.
be focused on the journey.
And we all have to do that. We all have to get out of our shell. And it is difficult. And I love how you said, the shell is also important,
Hmm.
because if danger lurks, you have it, to crawl back into, but not to stay there. And I think a lot of times we do tend to stay where it's comfortable.
Hmm.
And when things
Hmm.
come our way and it's like, and God wants you to move on and you're going, no, I'm perfectly fine. Something will happen and you'll have to come out of your shell.
Absolutely.
And I also love the questions at the very end of each chapter because I think it's a reflection. So whose
Yeah.
idea was that?
So it was not mine. It was not mine. So Naeem found a young lady. Her name escapes me right now, and I apologize. And she said to us, it's because she was editing it. She said, it'd be really good if you had questions at the end. And I was like,
Mm,
well, but why? And she says, yeah, Nate, because you understand why you wrote it, but everybody may not understand what what they could do with it. So put the questions at the end. So that was her ideal, and my son is responsible for finding the editor. I didn't find the editor. Honestly, he did.
yeah.
He found a publisher. He found a designer for the book cover. That was
Wow.
all. That was all him.
And it's wonderful because being an author, you have people that believe in you and they're going to help you along the steps so that you can get it published. And to
Yeah.
me, the questions are so important because a lot of people will use books in a book club and answer those questions along the
Right.
way in discussion. So it really adds more to the book. So kudos to her for saying, hey, you know what? We need questions in this book.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Okay, so not only are you a wonderful author, but
Thank
you're
you.
also a wonderful speaker. So you've done a TED Talk, and I absolutely loved it because to me it is timely. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So, and the name of it is We Owe Generation Z an Apology Today.
Mhm.
So, talk about what your inspiration behind that was and what the purpose of the speaking.
Well, so I have a good, I shouldn't say I had. I have a good friend. His name I do remember. His name is James Officer, and James invited me to apply for this TED Talk. It was at a local high school, and oddly enough, it was a school that was only about 20 minutes away from where I grew up. So I say, yeah, absolutely. And then they told me the theme, and they wanted to do something around Generation Z, and my son was on the cusp of that. And they've now moved it because we don't ever know when we want generations to be.
Right.
So they moved it. But my thought was whenever I would talk to people about the current generation, people who were in an older generation would always complain about the younger generation. And I'm like, well, trees and fruit. So how dare
Yeah.
we complain about the fruit? If you don't like it that it's a pear hanging up from a tree, well, perhaps you should take a look at yourself because maybe you're not the apple you thought you were. Maybe you're a pear after all. And so that's what I wanted to say. Let us stop complaining about what a generation is or isn't. Let's help them because a lot of what they are, we're responsible for it. The kids didn't get themselves addicted to screen time. We created screens and then we
Mhm.
gave them to them because we didn't want to do what we were supposed to do as parents. We wanted to outsource that. So you're mad at the children because they're inattentive. Well, you did that. Or kids are disrespectful, you say. Well, a lot of the stuff that we complaining about, in my estimation, were things that we were responsible for. So that's what I wanted to convey.
And don't you think that every generation is like this? Because I know my grandparents would talk about, I can't believe he's wearing a leather jacket. I can't believe she's wearing jeans. She's such a
Right.
rebel.
Right. Yeah. Every generation. Every
Every,
generation. Yeah. Yeah.
and I can tell I'm getting older because whenever the younger generation talks, I'm going, okay, I don't know what that terminology is. So it's like the meeting of the minds. It's really good that we're completely different because, like you said, humanity needs to move forward, and our
Yeah. Yeah.
greatest generation will do this. Well, is there anything that you want to make sure that we get into this conversation that we have not talked about?
No, I'm just grateful. We had a little bit of technology snafu, so I'm
Oh yeah.
grateful that you offered me grace and mercy for the snafu. So I really appreciate that. But no, mostly I'm just grateful that you saw fit to think me worthy enough to be able to share with your audience.
Oh, absolutely. And we talked about one book, but you have what, six? Is there
I
six
have
out there?
six. I have six.
And so, which one? Okay, I know this is like talking about children. Which one is your favorite book that you wrote?
think well, so two things. The favorite book I wrote, I think, has to be the first book because that is the book that encouraged me to continue to write. Um, but I guess the favorite book, the book I most enjoy writing is writing The Amazing World of STEM because I get to do that with my son. And
Oh,
it's loosely based on his life. And he and a young lady named Kiva Richardson, who's our illustrator, we get together weekly. We did get together weekly, but we strategize what it is we want to say in the story, what which one of the 17 things that the UN says threatens the existence of the planet we want to cover. And then we try to
mhm.
figure out how we're going to tell this story through the lens of a child that hopefully when parents read it with their children, they realize that we all have a lot of work to do. So those two books are probably my favorite. And then each day I now have a journal that I record and share, and it's called an audio cast.
Oh, yeah.
So Michelle, each morning when I wake up, I do my best not to talk to anyone in my home, which could be feel a little disrespectful to people at times. But I'm waiting quietly because I realize that we get 60 to 70,000 thoughts each day, and 90% of those thoughts are about something that happened yesterday. And I really want to make the most out of the gift that is the present. So I
Mhm.
listen to see what it is that I am to receive. And then in a stream of consciousness, I write for 20 minutes. And I write my life as I'd like it to be, not as it is.
Oh, wow. I absolutely love that.
Right. And
And
so
yeah, I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. And so I started doing it, and then people were asking me, well, what are you doing? You seem a little bit different. And while I'm really working on, people talk about it being mindfulness or being present. And then I have a friend who's a minister, and she said, hey, can I read them? And I let her read her. And her name is Dr. Robin Henderson Wilson. And Dr. Henderson Wilson said, hey, this sounds like my daily bread that I read. It's a little bit different, eh? Because sometimes, you sing in it and whatever, you say all kind of crazy stuff and you look comedic. But she said, no, it's really good. I think you should take these and write reflections and action statements. And I said, that sounds like a really good idea, but I'm not doing it. So if you want to do it, have at it. In a few months, she came back with 55 reflections. She picked her 55 favorite of these journals that I'd written over the past year. And then she wrote reflections and we published them in a book. And then when Will Smith published his book, Will, and most notably did the audio book, and folks so loved hearing his voice, she said, hey, you should do the same thing. And so now it's a real thing. That every day
Wow.
there's I send her the recording. She tells me which one she really likes. We have a guy who helps now edit it, and 3 times a week, it appears on all of the podcast places, yep. Spotify and iHeart and Apple, etc.
Oh, that is wonderful. And I really feel like you are so creative. I'm so glad that presently we have the technology, we have the means for you to share your creativity with the world.
Thank
And I
you.
know that's important for a creative person.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I guess my son reminds me. He told me, he said, the greatest, sometimes the greatest artists are not great while they're alive. So it's like, well, thanks, son. It's quite encouraging. He said, no, but you always tell me don't be focused on the outcome. Just
Right.
focus on the process. And the process is that you get up every day and you do something with a gift that you have. Every day you listen and you get a word and you find a way to creatively write about something that other people may not have ever thought about a certain way. And that's your gift, that's your art form. Now, whether or not people recognize it as something worthwhile today, don't worry about that. I was like, wow. Well, you told me that. I'm like, when I see myself the next time, I'm making sure I slap myself upside the head.
I was going to say, your words are coming back to you.
Oh my goodness, all the time. I'm like, I got a mouthful of them.
You're using it against you. Okay, so let's go ahead. You ready for the last question?
I am.
All right, let me share the screen and let me know if you do not see it. Okay,
Okay.
I think this is the one. All right, do you see it?
I see it. It says click to spin.
Okay, let's do it. Let's spin it.
All right. All right.
Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Secret talent.
Secret talent.
Wow. That's what secret talent do I have? Um, because I don't really have any secrets. I'm really pretty much transparent. So my secret talent would be transparency. Maybe people don't realize that I'm being transparent, and maybe
There
that's
you
a
go.
secret. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
I I have this expression that naked don't lie, people do. So that's my secret is trying to find a way to be transparent. It's not always everyone's cup of tea, but I found it easier to be authentically or transparently me as opposed to trying to figure out who I was the last time you saw me.
Oh, I love it. Absolutely love it. And that, and that is being your authentic you.
Hmm.
So we don't have to guess what you're thinking.
No, you'll know it.
Okay, so Nate, where can people reach you? Where's your favorite form of social media?
I don't have a favorite form of social media, sadly.
Yeah.
You can find me on our website. I have a Facebook page and I have Instagram and LinkedIn and all the other. I'm not on. I shouldn't say what I'm not. I'm not. I'm just on. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and I have a website. So that's where you can find me. And
Okay.
YouTube. Yes, I'm on YouTube now. So yes, I'm on YouTube as well.
Okay. Before we leave, everybody, I really feel like you need to share an inspiration because you are so good with words. Instead of me giving any inspiration, what inspirational thought do you have for everybody?
I would say that we constantly say tomorrow's not promised, but we live as though tomorrow is guaranteed. And I would encourage everyone to laugh today gregariously, to love as passionately as possible, and to live with joy on purpose for the duration of the day.
All right, you heard it here. So I will see everybody next week for another episode. So everybody have a fabulous week and do exactly what Nate said. Have joyful things this week. Just really live in the present and know that you are worth it. All right, everybody. See you then.